Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving headfirst into something, well, it's fascinating but often pretty heated.
Biblical prophecy, specifically timing.
Exactly. How Christians talk about Jesus' return, the resurrection. It sparks so much passion.
It really does, but often feels like people aren't really hearing each other.
That's the crux of it. We want to cut through some of that noise today. The core issue we're going to unpack is how one particular verse, 2 Timothy 2.17.
Hymenaeus and Philetus.
That's the one. It gets used almost like a conversation ender.
Right. Someone suggests maybe some prophecies were fulfilled in the first century.
And we should clarify, when we say resurrection here, it's often tied to that whole complex of judgment, end of the age, not necessarily just individual bodies rising every day.
Right, crucial distinction, yeah.
But you mentioned that first century possibility, pointing to things Jesus or Paul said.
Like this generation or we who are alive.
And immediately someone drops 2 Timothy 2.17. Boom. Discussion over. Labeled heresy.
Yeah, dismissed out of hand.
But here's the really interesting question we found looking into the sources. What if that knee-jerk reaction actually blocks a deeper understanding?
And maybe even contradicts what Paul himself was teaching about the timeline.
Exactly. That's what we want to explore. It's pretty illuminating when you dig in.
Definitely.
So let's take that typical scenario you mentioned. Christian A brings up first century fulfillment.
Maybe citing Matthew 24 or 1 Thessalonians 4.
And Christian B just shuts it down. Nope. That's the error of Hymenaeus and Philetus. End of story.
And what's fascinating and often missed is that Christian B is sort of using Paul's words to imply Paul got his own timing wrong.
Good point. Like a theological shield, as the source put it.
Exactly. Any idea of first century fulfillment gets tagged as this ancient heresy without really grappling with the texts themselves, which forces the question, what did Paul actually believe about the timing? Was he all over the place?
So let's get into the context. Hymenaeus and Philetus. Paul's writing to Timothy. When exactly?
Probably around 61 AD, give or take.
Okay, 61 AD. And then these guys are saying the resurrection is past already.
Think about that. 61 AD. They're jumping ahead. Well, by over 10 years before the sequence Jesus predicted even started.
It's like saying the movie's over when you haven't even seen the opening credits.
Precisely. The journey hadn't remotely begun.
And this is where the history really lights things up. Because we have a pretty detailed timeline after 61 AD. It shows just how premature they were.
Yeah, the chronology is stark.
So the first supernatural signs Jesus mentioned, they don't kick off until spring 62 AD, the stoning of James.
A key starting point.
Then May 62 AD, you get these weird reports. Josephus mentions armies in the clouds over Judea.
Strange phenomena, yeah.
Pentecost, June 62 AD, priests in the temple feel an earthquake, hear a voice saying, "We're leaving."
Eerie stuff, foreshadowing.
Then things escalate, but slowly. Summer 66 AD, the Zealots raid Masada, stop the Roman sacrifices, basically declaring war.
That's the point of no return, really.
Fall 66, Cestius Gallus marches on Jerusalem, then mysteriously retreats, which leads to the Zealots wiping out thousands of his troops.
A massive Roman defeat encouraged the rebels.
Now jump to early 67 AD. This is wild. Eyewitness accounts, again Josephus, of a heavenly battle seen over the temple.
Fulfilling 1 Thessalonians 4, maybe Revelation 12's war in heaven.
Seems like it. And crucially, this is when the Jerusalem church, remembering Jesus' warning.
It's out! Flees to Pella.
Right. Then comes the really brutal part. 67 to 70 AD, 3.5 years of siege, civil war inside Jerusalem.
Horrific suffering, just as Jesus predicted.
July 14th, 70 AD, temple services stop forever.
The end of an era.
August 9-10, 70 AD, the temple itself, destroyed, fiery end, like Revelation describes.
Devastating climax.
But even then, it's not totally over. 70 to 73 AD, Romans are mopping up strongholds.
Tiburon, Machaerus, Herodian.
Until finally April 10th, 73 AD, Masada, the mass suicide, that's the end of organized resistance.
So back in 61 AD.
Yeah. Hymenaeus and Philetus saying it's past. They were years, a whole decade plus, before even the first signs started.
Exactly. They claimed the destination, the resurrection, when the journey, that whole sequence Jesus laid out, hadn't even begun.
So their error wasn't necessarily the idea of fulfillment.
No, it was claiming it had happened before the context, before the events God said would accompany it. It was the timing relative to the prophetic script.
Okay, let's unpack Paul's correction then. He hears this resurrection is past claim.
And his reaction is basically, are you kidding me?
Right. How could it be past when we haven't seen any of the signs Jesus told us to watch for?
The revolt hasn't happened. The temple's still standing. The cosmic signs aren't here. What are you talking about?
And this is really the key insight, isn't it? Paul wasn't ditching his own teaching about things happening soon.
Not at all. He was defending it. He was saying, hey, don't short-circuit the process. Don't jump ahead of God's timeline.
He stays totally consistent. You see it everywhere.
Absolutely. Think about 1 Thessalonians 4. We who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. He includes himself.
He expected to be there.
And 2 Thessalonians 2, describing the man of lawlessness in the temple, destroyed by the Lord's coming. He ties it all to that generation, to those events.
So if he's teaching imminence, but correcting these guys, what's the synthesis?
The synthesis is simple. Paul was saying the resurrection hadn't happened yet in 61 AD. But when it did happen,
It would be exactly like he and Jesus have been saying all along.
precisely, tied directly to Jerusalem's judgment, the temple's fall, the end of that age. He wasn't pushing it off centuries. He was insisting it follow the revealed sequence.
And that link, Jerusalem's fall and the resurrection, that's something easily missed today.
Oh, hugely missed. People treat them as totally separate prophetic tracks, but Scripture ties them together.
Where do we see that most clearly?
Revelation 11 is maybe the most striking example. John measures the temple. Then the city gets trampled for 42 months. During that exact time, the two witnesses prophesy they're killed right there in Jerusalem.
The city where their Lord was crucified.
Yes. And then they literally come back to life. They ascend to heaven while enemies watch.
Wow, a very public resurrection.
And notice what happens immediately after that ascension. An earthquake hits, destroys part of the city.
Like a judgment follows resurrection.
And then, still in the same sequence, the seventh trumpet sounds, and the declaration comes from heaven. The time of the dead, that they should be judged, has come.
So it's all one flow. Trampling, witnesses, death, resurrection, judgment on the city, judgment for the dead.
It's presented as a connected, unfolding sequence, all tied to that specific time frame around Jerusalem's end, not centuries apart.
Then you add Revelation 12 on top of that.
Right, the cosmic backdrop, Satan trying to get the child.
Who gets caught up to God's throne?
Then the woman, the church, flees to the wilderness.
Which fits perfectly with the historical escape to Pella.
Exactly. Then the war in heaven, Michael versus Satan, while the woman is kept safe for that specific period.
A time, times, and half a time. 3.5 years.
The sequence is just undeniable when you lay it out. Church escapes, supernatural conflict over Jerusalem, faithful protected, judgment unfolds. All within the time frame Jesus gave. It's tightly woven.
And the kicker is, this wasn't just some invisible spiritual thing.
Not at all. It was dramatic enough that non-Christian historians wrote it down.
You mentioned Josephus before.
Yes, Josephus, the Jewish historian and eyewitness to the siege, he records these incredible things. Armies were seen to fight in the sky, the temple glowing with fire from clouds, that booming voice saying the gods were leaving.
He actually wrote that.
He did. In his complete works, he's just reporting what was seen and heard. He wasn't trying to prove Christian prophecy, obviously.
But he inadvertently did.
It lines up stunningly. It paints a picture where the supernatural events of Revelation weren't just abstract ideas. They were, well, visible phenomena tied to Jerusalem's judgment, seen by people there.
Okay, another piece of the puzzle from the sources is this idea of multiple abominations of desolation.
Right, understanding the full timeline kind of requires seeing this pattern. Scripture predicts 3, each escalating.
First one.
Daniel 8 points to Antiochus Epiphanes back in 167 BC, the first major defilement of the Second Temple.
Okay, historical precedent.
Second, Daniel 9. This points to the Zealots and Sicarii during that 67-70 AD period, turning the temple itself into a fortress, bloodshed, total desecration.
That's the one Jesus refers to in Matthew 24.
Yes, and Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2, John in Revelation 13. It's that first century abomination.
Third.
Isaiah 66.1-5 seems to predict that the Bar Kokhba revolt around 132-135 AD. His attempt to rebuild the temple system.
After God had already judged it and ended that covenant age in 70 AD.
Exactly. It was like the ultimate defiance, which Hadrian then crushed utterly, ending any possibility of rebuilding for good.
So seeing these three helps frame the 70 AD event.
It shows a pattern. God's consistent judgment on attempts to usurp or defile his sacred space and time, with 70 AD being the pivotal fulfillment Jesus focused on.
Okay, let's connect the dots now. Comparing Hymenaeus and Philetus' error with what the source calls modern futurists.
It's a stark comparison.
Hymenaeus and Philetus. They said resurrection was past, But Jerusalem was fine. The signs hadn't started. They ripped resurrection out of its predicted context.
They ignored the circumstances Jesus specifically linked it to: the tribulation, the temple's fall, the signs.
Okay. Now, modern futurists,
They say the resurrection is still future, even though Jerusalem did fall exactly as predicted,
when predicted, with the kinds of signs predicted.
leading to the complete end of the temple system, just as the New Testament writers expected.
So both positions kind of miss the mark.
In different ways, yeah. Both seem to ignore what Jesus actually taught. That his coming, the resurrection, the end of the age, it was all interconnected with Jerusalem's destruction within this generation, marked by specific signs.
And here's what the source called the breathtaking irony.
It really is something.
People use Paul's condemnation of premature fulfillment
Saying it happened too early.
to justify delayed fulfillment, saying it hasn't happened yet, nearly 2,000 years later.
They take his correction of people jumping ahead of the timeline as a reason to jump way beyond the timeline.
It's like using a no speeding sign to argue you should drive 5 miles per hour everywhere.
It's a complete inversion. Paul's correction was essentially, whoa, hold on, not yet. It'll happen soon, just like Jesus said, just like I've taught, when these specific things happen.
But that gets twisted into, oh, see, Paul said it wasn't past then, so it must be way off in our future.
Making Paul contradict his own urgent expectation, using his defense of proper timing to deny the actual timing he taught.
So the conversation needs to shift.
Absolutely. The key question isn't if Paul condemned false teaching. Of course he did.
The question is what made their teaching false?
Was it the idea of past fulfillment itself, or was it claiming it before the predicted circumstances occurred? Was Paul saying never in the first century, or was he saying not yet, but when it happens, it will look like this?
And when you frame it that way,
The whole picture becomes much more coherent. God's judgment unfolded just as predicted, when predicted, through the circumstances predicted. It all lines up: prophecy, timeline, history.
it makes the New Testament seem incredibly consistent.
It does. So, wrapping up that point, Hymenaeus and Philetus were wrong because they were premature. They jumped the gun.
Paul's correction was, don't get ahead of the revealed sequence.
Not, don't expect this sequence soon. Big difference.
So the conversation we need to have isn't just pointing fingers.
No, it's about asking. Are we letting a warning against being too early become an excuse for being, well, way too late? Have we jumped beyond a timeline God laid out?
Okay, so here's a final thought for everyone listening to chew on. If Jesus, Paul, Peter, John, if they all genuinely expected these massive prophetic events, the coming, the resurrection, the judgment, to happen in their lifetime,
They got it specifically to Jerusalem's fall.
and if history actually seems to record events lining up with those predictions,
What does that do to our understanding of the New Testament? Its urgency, the authority of the apostles themselves.
is it possible that when we use Paul's words about Hymenaeus and Philetus to dismiss the very timing Paul himself taught?
We might actually be the ones talking past the apostles, the very people whose message we claim to follow.
Something to think about.